You just realized your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other job sites. With Indeed sponsored jobs, your post jumps to the top of the page for your relevant candidates, so you can reach the people you want faster. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed have 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. Don't wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/ARTS. Just go to Indeed.com/ARTS right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need.
Welcome to NeedleXChange, the stories behind the stitches. I'm Jamie Chalmers, aka Mr. X Stitch, and this is the second part of my NeedleXChange with socially engaged artist and craftivist Tal Fitzpatrick. In this part of our conversation, Tal dives into the philosophy behind Craftivism, why dissent and tension matter, how connection and community shape her practice, and the balance between agency, positivity, and critique. We explore the ways banners, quilts, and workshops can foster dialogue, empower people to find their voices, and ripple into broader social change. I love talking about craftivism. Tal's got a PhD in the stuff. We have a right good chin wagger. If you've never heard of the concept of dissensus, well, you're in for a treat. If you want more craftivism in your ears, NeedleXChange 83 with Sarah Corbett is a quick session with someone who I've known for an equally long time. And if you enjoyed this episode, please do share it with a like-minded friend so more people can enjoy it. I'll be back next week with somebody else from the world of Stitch. So until then, enjoy the show. And I think, to go back to a point you made earlier, I think there's something innate about the nature of it being a craft. Like when we started doing work here in Crewe and we set up an art space, we didn't want the entire project to be framed in terms of art. So we sort of called the project Crewe Makes, because we just wanted it to be bedded on the ground, no implicit hierarchy or status, because then you give people permission to have a go, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely. And I do have quite a fondness for how textile skews towards women, because I think often, even in particularly in politics, but in activism too, it can be a very male-centric, and the conversations can be really dominated. But I think in these textile spaces, they have this inherent almost bias towards the experiences and voices of women. And I think that's one of its great strengths, and something I really enjoy in these projects is that it gives different kinds of people a voice, because all these men mostly self-select out of that, assuming it's not for them.
Yeah, that's fascinating, isn't it? It's like a filter, isn't it? Just naturally you go, well, thanks guys. You go off and just hit a golf ball around or whatever.
Yeah,
that's amazing. So you've got three, I'm paraphrasing here, there are three elements of craftivism that you kind of identified. Am I right? Agency, connection, and dissensus.
Dissensus.
I love that. We're going to talk about that. But I just wondered if you'd care to touch on those points a bit.
Yeah, certainly. So with my research, what I was kind of finding, I was getting myself and the people participating in my projects and the research I was doing was revealing that what you get out of being a maker, I kind of don't care what it is. There's this amazing book called Tinkering too that I quoted a lot in this chapter, but it was kind of the idea that making things by hand, and I think this is even a quote from Betsy Greer, reminds us that we have power. We can physically change the world when we're making something. We can physically create something from nothing. We can find a problem and then use our creativity and our creative problem-solving skills to solve it. And that feeling, that sense of accomplishment, that sense that we figured something out, that we made something, is really powerful for our human psyche. And I think we've lost so much of the opportunity to have that feeling, because in this kind of very digital world, we don't have to do a lot of physical problem solving. We don't have to create something if we don't, not one of those people who are like us artists who are like, sorry, we have shapes and colors in our brains that we need to go do. We can't come to lunch. But that sense of agency and accomplishment and capacity that you can build when you're practicing as a maker is a transferable skill. It leaks out into other parts of your life and makes you feel more capable in other and confident in other areas of your life. And that includes, I think, in your capacity to engage with political, social, environmental problems. They're not just these kind of abstract, scary things. They're things that you can think, okay, well, how do I break this down? What can I do? What part of it can I tackle? And I think that's really important stepping stone in our like journey as activists, is to feel like we are capable of doing something and starting to make some creative choices around what those things could be. So that sense of agency, I think, that comes along with making and that you experience as part of making is equally as important as the kind of therapeutic benefits that I think we hear a lot about within the craftivism and craft community. But I don't hear as much about that sense of agency and capacity and creative problem solving and critical thinking that comes with being a maker, being an artist, being a creative. So I think that's really important. Dissensus for me is really important too. I think there was, and this is great and valid for a lot of people, I think there's a lot of conviviality in the craftivism space, and I think there's a lot of, let me put it this way, I felt a lot of pressure to be quite positive in my projects, and particularly these big projects where you're, trying to encourage people to engage and you want people to do something about the issues they care about and not just turn off because it's all too much. Like, that's what we want as activists. We want people to stay engaged, to sit with the discomfort, to be able to not just turn off. And I actually ended up finding that positivity a little bit, I think, we hear it now, that idea of toxic positivity, the thing where you like have to pretend it's all great and this is going to change the world. Like, probably won't, but it's better than nothing. And we can sit in that discomfort and we can disagree. And that's part of democracy itself, is the capacity to come together and to sit with tension. And it's not about like being argumentative or antagonistic in the way that some activism can be read, but it's about how can we be in community together when we don't see eye to eye on every single issue, and how do we make work that points to those tensions, that highlights those issues, that reveals that complexity, and isn't just glossing over that and pretending that if we'll be positive enough, it will all be okay. So that kind of tension is really important to me in my work. Almost in the same way, I think maybe this is a helpful example, I really like playing with the kind of masculine, feminine tension within textiles. I make work that I don't know if it reads this way, but to me is like I try to make it kind of mask. Like, I use a lot of denim and spikes, and there's a lot of like skull imagery and stuff in my work that is a bit dark, I guess. And I like the fact that like it's still like a quilt and it's pretty and it's soft, but it's got difficult text on it. It's talking about difficult issues, or it's not trying to be pretty. So I think that's a nice example of how we can like use these tensions in a generative way and then kind of hold space for dissensus.
Yeah, I love that idea. It's not something I'd really considered until I started, prepping to talk to you. But like, when you've got opposing viewpoints on something, it's just really easy to just agree to disagree, or to walk away or whatever, isn't it? But it even makes me think sometimes when I fall out with my wife, like, I don't want to go to bed on an argument, so I will continue talking about it, no matter how awkward it's going to be, to kind of get through it, because you'll find an end goal somewhere, but you do have to kind of process it. And I suppose it's that same thing, isn't it? Does the craftivism or the act of making provide the reason to continue the conversation? Would you say that's right?
I guess it depends on the design of the project. This does get a bit esoteric, and if anyone wants to go read the sources of this, it's like Rancière, who talks about dissensus. So it's kind of like it's quite esoteric political philosophy. But I think pragmatically, what we really want is to avoid this kind of flattening, simplifying, binary ways of being and seeing the world. So if you're being pulled into a conversation where there's a clear villain and a clear hero, then there's some gray that's being ignored there. And I think what this idea of dissensus is trying is to encourage us to think about and value the gray, and to not just fall into camps and into kind of being radicalized on either ends of the spectrum, which we're seeing a lot in the world these days.
Do you think there's something about being content with there not being an outcome? Like you say, it's not black or white, and just that kind of vagary, just being able to accept that for what it is, and that you might not get that sense of closure that you feel is the right thing to happen.
And I think that's reality. Like, nothing's going to be solved forever, and then we're like done with it. It's the same as you're saying in relationship too. Like, you can fix one argument, but something else will happen next week, and you're going to have to like revisit that again. This idea that we can like solve something and walk away, I think, is nice, but a bit simplistic maybe.
Yeah, it's a marketing exercise, isn't it? Hi, do you suffer from the menopause? Well, this will get rid of that in 3 simple
Sign
tablets.
this and eat this.
Yeah. That's it. Click it. The other thing that I wanted to touch on that you mentioned, which is also something that Betsy had mentioned when I interviewed her, is just the sort of, I don't know, you said it about having to be positive when you're leading on these kind of workshops and stuff. And I think that's something that Sarah is also quite sensitive to. And to me, it does feel like a bit of the marketing thing where you're like, hi, everybody, I'm here to help you improve the world through needlecraft. And I know exactly how it works because somehow I'm better than everybody. There's like this whole marketing spiel, isn't it? And that lacks that humanity. And the humanity is really the thing that exists at the core of this gentle protest that reflects your local environment. When I was talking with Betsy, the discord of going like, I made a banner and I sent it to my MP and we haven't stopped climate change, and that whole thing. And just, I know a lot of your work is about people understanding and being at peace with the context in which they choose their craftivism. And I think that's a really salient point. Those are things I've touched on. I wanted to get your take on them.
Yeah, I think in our change making, which is kind of, and in doing work that we find meaningful and gives us meaning and helps us get out of bed when things are horrific, I think we have a choice to make of what we do with our time and with our energy, and again with our social networks and with our energy, and to be gently, pushing that stone up the hill every day, and to know that one big project isn't going to fix it. One, big fundraiser isn't going to fix it, but it's something we all can keep chipping away at it. And however you choose to do that, whatever that looks like in your practice, in your craftivism, that's enough. And you can choose one small patch, one little issue that you care about. It can be, the bees in your local suburb. if you can make a little bit of inroad for that, that matters. And if all of us are doing something small in our own way, that has an impact. Not one we'll ever be able to like trace back to ourselves, but the alternative, which is all of us doing nothing or giving up or feeling, totally disengaged and disempowered, like that's worse. That makes us all feel worse, and that the outcomes of that, I think, are worse. So however you can, whatever, whether it's through your making or through going to protests or through donating to organizations, however you can, choose to do that, like choose to be part of it in some way. And I think that, for me, that is what gives me purpose and hope. Because outside of that, I don't know how much I would have.
Yeah, and it comes back to the agency thing. It comes back to that thing of...
You just realized your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other job sites. With Indeed sponsored jobs, your post jumps to the top of the page for your relevant candidates, so you can reach the people you want faster. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed have 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. Don't wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/ARTS. Just go to Indeed.com/ARTS right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need.
Like, what difference can you make? Like, no amount of making a protest banner here is going to stop the Chinese decision to use coal-fired power stations or whatever, is it? And so it's like slightly redundant to make that leap. Whereas, like you say, for me, I always talk about dog poo bins, but do you know what I mean? It's just like, if you can do something that changes the environment that you see around you on a day-to-day, that's got to have a more profound effect. It feels like you're less likely to set yourself up for the sort of disappointment that may arise when your MP just posts you a letter saying, thanks for the quilt.
And you become a model for the people around you. And I think sometimes that can be the biggest impact we can have, is in our interpersonal lives and in the way that we influence the people that we're in direct contact with. And we see that, environmental activism is a really clear example of that. Or within the textiles, like upcycling, mending, upskilling people to understand the horrific impact of textile waste and making better choices around how they engage with fast fashion. Like, by doing that yourself, you're encouraging the people around you to think about that stuff and do that stuff, hopefully, too. And that, for me, like, those are kind of the ripples that, trace across the pond, and you don't know where those ripples will go and how they will intersect or how they will change the surface, but they do move out in interesting ways.
And the next thing you know, it's a post-punk ripple effect, and you're just looking back at it. Amazing. Right.
I feel like there was a third thing that I didn't.
Was there the third thing was connection. I feel like to some extent we've talked about that, but do give me your reflections on connection. You've done a lot.
I think, like, I don't often frame it that way, but I'm a socially engaged artist, kind of like at the heart of my practice, which is to say that I make art to connect with myself and with others. And it, in part, maybe it's because I don't feel like I'm that great at doing it in other ways. Like, I always admire people who have amazing capacity to know everyone's names and remember everyone's contexts and stories and, like, stay in touch with everyone they knew from high school their whole lives. But I'm not one of those people. In my day-to-day, I have kind of like a small circle of concern and a small number of relationships I can manage. But through my artwork and through the workshops that I run, so the kind of Craftivist banner making workshops I run with this Changemakers tour that I'm part of right now, through my work as an artist educator at the local gallery here on the Gold Coast, I'm able to make connections with people through making together and sharing our kind of passion for creativity and for change making, for human rights, for women's rights. And that community really energizes me, and I think is a way that I can give back and act on my values in a way that's meaningful.
Do you think are there different like strata of community? Because you can do one thing, you can put stuff out on Instagram and get a load of comments. That's one thing. But then the connections you get, for instance, with your quilt projects where you're receiving tangible items from people, that's an entirely another layer of connection. And then even more so the people you will meet when you do a workshop at your local gallery. Like, what's your take on the value of those connections? Which ones do you lean into more?
I try to lean into it in two ways. I'm conscious that I have a certain level of privilege and that my art gives me a voice that many people do not have, to speak into spaces that many people do not get to speak into. So I'm interested in finding ways to funnel their voices into my work and to share their voices in that way. Not because I think I'm like a great amplifier or something, but partly also because I'm like not that interested in my own story necessarily or in my own thoughts as much as I am at finding out what are our common feelings, what are lots of us thinking about, what are lots of us worried about, what are lots of us angry about. A lot of my work comes from a place of anger, whether it's like anger at the state of the world, or more recently I've been doing a lot of work about feminine rage and thinking about what female identifying people are quietly seething about. So I'm interested in having these conversations and finding our common humanity and creating work that reflects that back to ourselves. So that's a really important part for me in the way that I look to make connections, is to be having those kinds of conversations. And I think they enable me to make better work. And I'm also really interested in how I can help people find their own voice. I think on the journey to being an activist, one of the other things you need to do, as well as finding a sense of agency and capacity, is to find your voice and to be able to start to think very critically and engage with issues and think, okay, well, what do I actually think? And do I think that? Or is that just something that people who have influence over me have said and I'm just parroting that? Or is that just something I heard on TV? So I think that the criticality that is required when you start to voice your own ideas or your own passions and beliefs is something that Craftivism can help you do, particularly like in the workshops that I make. I'm like, all right, we're making a banner. We got 2 hours. What does your banner say? The hardest bit in getting people to make work is to choose that text. What do you say? And I have to remind people, like, doesn't have to be the only banner you ever make in your life. It doesn't have to be the be-all and end-all thesis that summarizes everything you want to say. But, like, what do you want to say right now? What is on the top of your mind? What are you most passionate about? What are you most concerned about? What do you want to say to yourself, even if it's just something that you hang up in your house? What do you want to see every day and be reminded of? What matters to you? And I think that question is actually really powerful for us to reflect on, and we don't give ourselves a lot of time to do that kind of reflection. And the process of making and the process of engaging in craftivism really opens up that space for us.
I remember doing a workshop once where I think we were getting young people to describe, it was almost like we were going to describe a word, like choose a word that describes them, and then maybe we could move on. I like the idea of power mantras, just trying to find a word that emboldens you or something. And they were like, I don't know, 11, 12-year-olds, whatever. And one kid just said hungry. And for a while I was just like, is that something we should be concerned about? But actually thinking about it, that was just front of mind, and I really like
relatable content. Yeah.
Straight out of the back. Because I think the hardest thing, isn't it, is trying to convince people to get out of their own way. Like, finding your voice is just about saying what you got to say and as you just said, it won't be the last thing you ever say. So just say it and then say the next thing and then the next thing and the next thing, because that's where you find your nerve, I guess, isn't it?
Yeah. But in contrast to like doing it in a Facebook post or whatever, you also then have to sit with it for 2 hours and like put your time and effort into like making it physically real and as beautiful as you can often. So I think that process too makes people stop and be like, oh, do I actually care this much about it? Do I care enough to have to like have this physical object be in the world after I'm done saying this? And I think that also creates this different kind of provocation as opposed to something that feels as disposable as just like typing words into the ether.
Yeah, you can't course correct quite as easily when you're like half an hour into an embroidery project, can you? That's interesting. Yeah. Have you got any obvious recommendations for people who want to start on their own Craftivist journey?
What would my recommendation be? I get a lot of inspiration from the Craftivism community itself and from seeing what other people make. I think one of the real gifts of craft, which is really unique in contrast to what happens within the art world, is you don't have to have an original idea to get started or to make something. So we have patterns that you can use. If you see a message, a text that you really like, you can make that yourself for yourself. Like there's this kind of precedent within craft where we do remake the same things and again and again. And things like the samplers are a good example where you always make it your own, but you don't have to have that pressure of coming up with the best new original idea that no one's ever thought of. So I think that's really generous within the craft world. So my recommendation would be take a look around, get inspired. It's always good to ask for permission, particularly if you're like looking to remake people's work. But I found the community really generous and encouraging, particularly when you're starting out.
Yeah, that's it. And if that's the tool that you need to take your first step, then use it and then take a second step, and who knows what that one's going to be.
Yeah, and as you grow in confidence, you will have your own original ideas and you will experiment and find new ways and you will find your voice both as an activist and as an artist, I think, in stylistically in how your work starts to manifest.
I think one of the other takeaways, I think, from talking to Betsy as well was at the end of the day, the only world that you can change is your world. But that's all right. Have a crack at that. It's definitely, if you make your world a better place, then that's going to have a positive impact on the people who share your world.
And the generations to come.
Yeah. Next thing you know, you've got a quilt above your granddaughter's bed and your granddaughter's going, oh, blooming heck, look at that. She did that. Should we get into the hard questions now that we've done the easy stuff about, dissensus and change making?
There is one project we haven't talked about, which is something I'm still really doing right now, which is this kind of quietly seething project.
Go on.
So I was really lucky last year in 2024 to be given a 6-month-long artist residency at Hodder, which was this amazing program where they paid us as part-time employees and gave us studio space, me and 4 other artists, for 6 months. And we didn't have a specific outcome we needed to deliver to. It was just to be artists and to make work, to do the work of being an artist. And as part of that project, I created the kind of second iteration of this quietly seething project that explores the power and pain of feminine rage. So in 2023, I had a solo show where I started to look at this. I created a body of work that was like 32 textile banners about anger and about the unique experience of feminine rage. And as part of that project, I also invited female identifying people to respond to an anonymous online questionnaire that kind of asked, what are you quietly seething about? How does anger feel in your body? How do people respond to you when you're angry? And I collected over 60 responses to that were really powerful and vulnerable, and some of them were really sad and some of them were really funny. And I had, at the end of that exhibition, I had this amazing collection of stories that I then felt like I really needed to reciprocate that trust that the people who shared their stories with me, and find a way to share those stories with a broader audience. So during my residency, I created a installation work which is made on upcycled wool theatre curtains, and it's a kind of 3-meter drop by 9-meter curtain that hangs in a big oval that you can walk into, that's appliqued with images kind of looking at mythology and the life cycle of a woman from child, maiden, mother, crone, and ancestor. So they're the kind of figures that are on the work. But in the center of the space, there's a chair with headphones, and you can sit down and listen to the audio of the messages that I collected, the stories I collected. So me and about 10 friends recorded the text that I was given, and it comes out at like 94 minutes of audio. And so it's kind of a durational work. You cannot listen to it all at once. It's kind of really heavy. But the idea of the work is that you can come in and out, and it's this kind of beautiful space. It's very shiny and beautiful and tactile, but the stories you're listening to they're almost like confessions. They're secrets that we don't talk about. They're this kind of anger that is really different to the righteous anger that we see very often in activism.
You just realized your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other job sites. With Indeed sponsored jobs, your post jumps to the top of the page for your relevant candidates, so you can reach the people you want faster. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed have 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. Don't wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/ARTS. Just go to Indeed.com/ARTS right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need.
So I think the kind of anger that drives activism is a very good source of fuel. It's this kind of righteous anger that we all share together that is directed at injustice, and you can feel very proud. I think it's a lot easier to be like angry on behalf of other people too. And this kind of quietly seething project is more about that anger we have at ourselves, or the interpersonal anger, the anger we have at our in-laws, the anger we feel because we've been violated and we don't know what to do with that, the anger and shame that comes with things like eating disorders, or feeling like you're not enough, or like you have to do way more of the housework than your husband does. And there's all this kind of anger that none of us talk about because it isn't self-righteous, and it's not something you can be proud of. It's like a very upsetting, isolating kind of anger that I think a lot of women carry, that they don't feel that they can express. And this project is really about that. And I was kind of shocked in listening to the stories about the resonances across these different people's experiences, and then how that changed over the life cycle. So lots of young women talking about being scared of their own anger, not even knowing how to process it, not recognizing something as anger, just being so disconnected from that emotion because they've been like socially, culturally trained to not display or feel that emotion, to then on the other side of the spectrum to see all of the elders in our community who've been through menopause and are just like really kind of way more, either have kind of come out the other side having like overcome anger and being much more at peace with that feeling, or like finding it kind of funny and not giving a fuck as much and like just being okay with being angry and not caring what people think about them when they are angry as much. So that's a project that I've previewed, but that hasn't been exhibited publicly yet. And that's something that I hope will get to have a big audience in the future.
Yeah, it's a fascinating topic. And it's a fascinating topic that me, as a middle-aged white man, feel very nervous talking about, because I automatically just know that I'm out of my depth. I saw a comedian recently called Bridget Christie, who she's in her 50s, and she was saying about going through the menopause and how your estrogen levels dissipate. And that means that just stop trying to like care for people, which then frees you up to no longer give a flying shit about anybody. And I think that, to me, what you're saying about the older generations is they're more at ease with it because that discord isn't there between what they feel they should be doing. But I just, like, if you had to give any pointers to middle-aged white men or other people of my, what are the takeaways? Do you think this inner seething is just a part of the feminine human condition? I mean, I'd imagine men, because men suffer from mental health issues, like everybody's got seething, but do you think it is just a part of a condition and it just sucks that society says you can't really talk about it? Is it?
I think what's interesting is like for us to have the conversation, because why are some emotions gendered in a weird way where like men are allowed to be angry. That's one of the feelings you guys are allowed to have, but you're not allowed to have other kinds of emotions. That whole trope of like boys don't cry, like the way that you guys have to hide your vulnerability or your sadness. The kind of inverse of that is that anger on women is seen as masculine, and that we, and there's lots of research and data around the way that particularly like women of color, if they are angry, they're like treated in this entire different way, that anger is not acceptable, and therefore you have to like augment your behavior and augment what kind of emotions you can show in public and show to the people in your lives even. So I think what's interesting is to have these conversations and to ask, like, what are you quietly seething about? And what are you guys feeling really vulnerable about right now? What are you worried about? What are you sad about? What are you anxious about? And to kind of decouple these gendered tropes about emotions. I think that's the conversation to be having.
Yeah, and do you think those gender tropes, I mean, they're social constructs, aren't they? They're historical social constructs. But do you think that there are parts of the globe where those constructs are weaker? Because it feels to me like it could quite easily, in the same way as the American dream, in the same way as loads of these things are just stories, if we tell them often enough. There's like the century of the self and how we've used psychology to make marketing mean we want a Disney T-shirt and we don't know why. Do you think there are still areas where those tropes aren't as strong, so people have more freedom, like women have more freedom to just chop shit to bits in anger and everyone goes, nice one, I'll see you for a cup of tea a bit later?
Yeah, I definitely think because they are a social cultural construct, that this varies very much between different cultures and different communities. And that's super interesting. That's a great conversation to have. But I think,
But your response is very much from like people within your demography, or were they responses from across the world? Or
in this particular project, it was a kind of much closer knit circle around me, because it was something that it's quite a laborious thing to do. Like these were like long form written responses to an online survey. So I think like they were mostly the people that were in and around this quietly seething project that I was doing, the physical artworks that I created and the exhibition So a lot of the people who responded went to my show. But I do have that kind of broader social reach through my kind of online craftivism. So there was a few people from different places around the world and different cultures, but this definitely skewed towards female identifying people and a few queer people within my own broader community here in Australia.
Yeah. So it's a good, as you say, with a lot of these projects that you've talked about, they serve as catalyst for change, a catalyst for internal change, but also strangely a sort of infographic.
I do love data as a researcher. I think we all skew that way when we've gone through academia, but I think of them more as like storytelling devices. So I think of the objects as like that's their job. They're like this kind of touchstone, and what they can do is they can unlock conversations and stories and questions that can then lead to that interpersonal, community-based change or impact even, or just making people feel feelings. I think that's the job of good art, is to like make people stop, make people think, make people feel.
Sounds like the Quietly Seething project has got a lot of legs, like it could be a thing that could go on for a while.
I hope so. And I do hope it goes different places, because the survey's still open, so I'm still collecting stories potentially, and I would love to keep collecting stories as the work travels in different places to kind of literally broaden out that data set and find ways to iterate this into the future and think about like, okay, well, it'd be great to have, right now I've got like a qualitative data set, but it'd be great to have a quantitative data set and be like, okay, like what are 3,000 women quietly seething about? Like, and how is that different across different geographies, and how is that impacting their health and well-being? And yeah, how's that different throughout their lives? I think, I know, just as a woman, it's something I feel like it's empowering for me to know that information, and it's empowering for me to hear other people share their experiences that are either similar or dissimilar to mine, but make me feel less alone.
Yeah, there's something, isn't there, about just that sense of relief of suddenly realizing that like you're not the only. Yeah.
And yeah, that was the really amazing part of listening to this. It was like, I thought I was the only one who felt this way. Or I had a couple of these where I was like, I asked a few of my friends, I was like, is that yours? Did you write that? And they were like, no, but that would be exactly what I would say. Like to the, yeah.
It's the marketing thing again, isn't it? It's kind of like, it could be everybody's doing that, but nobody ever goes out on social media to do it. Hi, making memories about being really fucked off about something.
Some people do, and I appreciate them.
That sounds so that project is coming to fruition then?
Yes, hopefully it'll get its first exhibit mid next year in Victoria. So that's something to keep your eyes peeled on. But in the meantime, you can see a video of that, kind of a couple of snippets from that work, including some of the audio on YouTube, on my YouTube channel. There's like a video of it there.
Yeah, cool. Have you got any other projects in the pipeline, or is this one sounds like it could be fairly consuming for the time being?
It's one of my biggest challenges. It's one of the questions you asked later. I was like, I need a project manager just for that project, because it is so big and it requires a lot of resources. Like, it's a massive artwork. The installation is really massive because the work's so big, and it needs to like hang from the ceiling, and it kind of levitates. So it kind of like restricts where I can show it, but also just building crates for it is going to cost like $5,000. So it's a very laborious, expensive project, and it gives me no time to do other stuff. But I'm doing so much other stuff. So I think the next project is another collaboration with Melissa Spratt, which we're doing here in partnership with our local city council, actually. They've just released their new climate sustainability and resilience policy for the next 10 years. And we're doing a project that's helping them to connect with the local community and raise awareness about their new goals and targets and programs. And we're doing a kind of community quilt project around that. So that's going to happen later in the year. And I've got a friend of mine and I started a kind of feminist arts group here on the Gold Coast called The Golden Thread. And we've got our first group exhibition happening in October as well. So I'm helping to curate and put that exhibition together, which I'm really excited for. It's going to be called Revelations Aloe Gallery. So I'm really excited for that kind of, again, it's a kind of another version of, for me, of my practice as a socially engaged artist, like having this feminist artist group and putting on shows. For me, that is art in itself. So yeah, I'm really excited for that too.
It's never a dull moment, is there?
There's a lot to do.
I like it. I do sometimes think, I was thinking about Diana Waymar's Tiny Pricks project and how at the end of the first Trump term she thought she'd finished and now it's still going or whatever. And then I was thinking about, there's another project called The Red Dress I'm going to be interviewing.
Oh, great. That's amazing, that project.
Yeah. And that's another one that's just gone on and on and on. And you sometimes think, like, listening to you talking about Quietly Seething and just going, yeah, you could do that for the next decade without like losing momentum. I think is there sometimes a point, do you think, where you go, I'm going to have to draw a line under this because otherwise this is going to be my life's work. And it's like, I've got lots of other works to make my life's work.
I think what will be the line, and I think this is true for many makers, is like when my hands and my eyes give out and I can't stitch anymore.
Yeah.
Then I'll be forced to do something else.
Yeah, it's interesting when you see, like, I look back on my path and I think I started out doing this because I wanted to like sell cross stitch patterns and I had a run at making a cross stitch magazine, and now like we're on the brink of signing a 10-year lease to open an art gallery in the centre of town. And you just, the way the course of these things takes you, sometimes you kind of have to surrender to it a bit, don't you? And just go, this is what seems to be happening, and be okay with that.
Yeah, I definitely have no plan and have never had a plan, but I find the work meaningful and I try to be open and willing to follow it where it goes, and to, you know, I think as artists, a lot of us are doing a lot of applications and grant writing and trying to get into awards, and I'm doing all of that too, and I get a lot of no's from all that stuff, but then there are things that come to you, and I try to be very responsive to the work that comes to me, because I think that's the light, that's the path. So yeah.
And then you get those moments, as you said at least twice, where a bunch of stuff clicks together, a bunch of these disparate elements. And I've had that as well, even to the point, like I used to work in a pub and we had an event here of an evening, and one time this guy came in who was really quite drunk, and my pub skills suddenly kicked back in,
like,
and I politely scored.
You just realized your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other job sites. With Indeed sponsored jobs, your post jumps to the top of the page for your relevant candidates, so you can reach the people you want faster. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed have 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. Don't wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/ARTS. Just go to Indeed.com/ARTS right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need.
Putting him back out there, honestly. But you look back, don't you, and just like, oh my God, okay, that's why that was happening or whatever. Like, that's what's weird, isn't it? You kind of give into it. You think, right, I'm just going to not overthink this. And then you look back a bit and you go, okay.
Makes sense retrospectively.
Yeah, always does, doesn't it? Always does. Cool. Now, shall we talk about music and film and things?
Yes.
You ready for this? Very nice. Because you've got a cool musical background, I feel like let's start with, do you have like a favourite band? Do you have a favourite album?
I do. Long and hard about this because, yeah, as you can see, I'm in a music studio. My partner is a musician and a music producer, and music is a very important part of our lives. But my all-time album and artist is No Need to Argue by the Cranberries, which, yeah, is an oldie, came out in 94, but is just timeless for me. There's no time where any of those songs come on that I'm not immediately just so happy to be listening to it. And yeah, I know every word on every song of that record. And I think the kind of ethos and the politics of the Cranberries is, something that still stands the test of time and I find really inspiring.
It's interesting. This is going to sound like a really naive thing to say, really, but obviously the Cranberries are an Irish band. You're quite a long way from Ireland. It's interesting. It's not
My
like...
name is Fitzpatrick, though.
Well, oh, yeah, that's true. That's true. That's probably what it is, isn't it? Yeah, those kind of things.
Somewhere along the...
Do you have particular favourite songs? I mean, I'm not fully Cranberries versed other than Linger, which still reminds me of doing hospital radio when I was a kid, but that was a few years before that album, I think, or something.
I think the title track, No Need to Argue, is stunning if you want to go start somewhere on that album.
Is that about dissensus?
I definitely think they speak that kind of, we say this a lot now, but the Cranberries were doing a lot of kind of talking truth to power in a way that did create a public discourse of dissensus, this refusal to go with the flow, this refusal to be digestible, this refusal to be happy, shiny people holding hands, I think that capacity for resistance, that tolerance for discomfort, for making other people uncomfortable, and for being this kind of having this raw, honest message. I think that's a good example of how musicians create dissensus, open up spaces for dissensus.
How much does music factor into your working practice?
I'm never not listening to music or podcasts, and I'm never not singing to myself. So I share a studio space with two of my friends, and they just have to surrender to the fact that the sewing machine is going and I'm singing to myself.
That's fair. Podcasts, seeing as how you mentioned it, you got any favourite podcasts? NeedleXChange notwithstanding, of course.
I was thinking about this too, and it's another Irish one, actually. I've been listening to the Blind Boy podcast a lot, and I really, again, appreciate his politics, his capacity for dissensus, his creative problem solving, the way he creates these serendipitous stories that bring together seemingly disparate parts of life, history, mythology, environment, current events, and creates these through lines. I highly recommend.
I used to listen to a podcast called The Rest is Politics, very popular over here, and I stopped listening to it this year because I found it was giving me 2 times a week when I get annoyed at things. And I just wonder, I mean, do you have things that balance you out? Because I think the problem is when you're immersed in the world of politics, activism, and those sorts of things, there's a stress layer there that's unavoidable. So I just wonder what you do to kind of self-care.
Yeah, we haven't talked about it, but I was born in Israel, and this past couple of years have been horrific, and the genocide in Gaza is never not on my mind, and I've basically stopped engaging in any kind of media that isn't escapist. I have had to really cut down on how I ingest the news. I used to be, I grew up watching the news every night. Even as a child, during COVID, I was getting minute by minute rundowns of everything that was happening during the first Trump presidency. I was across every single policy change, every single event that was happening, and I've really had to step back from the minutiae and the day-to-day ups and downs and the constant graphic horrors of what's going on in the world. And that's not to say that I'm not informed or staying up to date. But yeah, I'm not listening to the podcasts I used to listen to that would like break down everything that happened and have like 2-hour conversations about it. I'm just trying very hard to stay true to my values, to advocate for truth and justice, and to stay hopeful in the face of it all.
It's quite hard, isn't it? Because the thing is you don't want to, like you just said, it's almost like you've apologized for doing it because you're not putting your head in the sand. And I'm very sympathetic to this. The thing is otherwise you're just going to be defeated by the relentlessness of it all. You have to take time to go, me and my wife sat out in the back garden doing the thing where you turn the lights off and you just stare at the sky and the stars start to appear because your eyes adjust to it. And then every now and again we like see a little satellite bobbing over. You need stuff like that to just recharge your soul a bit, don't you?
Yeah, the grief is it is crushing, and that's just Gaza, not let alone the kind of environmental apocalypse we're facing right now, and the fact that not nearly enough is going to be done to mitigate the natural disasters that are coming our way, that I know full well how that goes down in communities. Like, we have some very hard times ahead of us, and that is brutal, and it will make you sick from the sadness, from the grief. And we need to hold on to hope, and we need to hold on to joy, and we need to find ways to connect with the beauty and wonder of life. Otherwise, otherwise what's the point?
And weirdly, that then comes back to the point you made absolutely ages ago about how you observed that in these times of all these crises, people turn towards art because it gives them the beauty and it gives them the joy and it gives them the hope, isn't it?
And we need to have we need to find ways to imagine a better future. Because otherwise, how do we get there? And it's our job to hold each other gently in these moments, to again stay in that gray space, stay in the dissensus, keep away from that binary thinking, from that us and them thinking that's tearing us apart, and come together on that shared humanity, what makes us, what can bring us together, what we value, the human rights, like things that we thought we had all agreed on that are now being torn apart. I try to make art that brings us back to that, and to remembering that that's what we care about, actually.
What I like now is the clunkiness of me going, so do you have a favourite book? Just going, oh God, hang on, let's transition back. No, totally true what you say, though. I don't want to make light of any of that. It's just like, oh, okay. Yeah. Do you have a favourite
My favourite book is Women Who Run with the Wolves, Myths and Stories of the Wild Women Archetype by Dr. Clarissa Estes. It was originally published in 1989. It's a book that one of my ex-partner's mum gave to me maybe 13 years ago. And a couple of years ago, maybe 2-3 years ago, I finally picked it up and read it, and it just floored me. It kind of uses mythological stories and stories from First Nations cultures in different parts of the world to explore this wild woman archetype. And I highly recommend any woman reads it. Go read it. Just read it.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Read it. No need for quietly seething, just be a wild woman. It feels like that might be part of the takeaway.
It's amazing. It really, thinking of the power of story and myth, and why that, and the power of mythology and these stories, how they can help us understand ourselves, and again, help us feel that we are not alone and that our experience and the challenges we face are not unique, and that there is other people who've gone through them and survived, and that there are these kind of wisdoms that have been passed down through generations that we can still learn from. I think that's she's both a psychologist and a historian and a storyteller, and she brings this kind of together in a really amazing way.
Yeah, probably nice to hear kind of uncommon stories as well, perhaps, because we're getting quite bored of the common stories, I suspect. Do you have a favourite film?
So my favourite film is the Lord of the Rings trilogy, partly because it's the only film where I've gone to the film set. So I've been to Hobbiton twice, and it's my favourite place in the world.
Excellent.
And I've been to the Weta Workshop where they made a lot of the kind of props and sets and things for the shows. But it's also because the books were really important to me as a young person. And it's definitely fits in that kind of fantasy escapist thing that I've been leaning on a lot lately to deal with the horrors of reality, and kind of like to go elsewhere.
Do you think there's any merit in a sort of Craftivist banner campaign down at Hobbiton? Perhaps messages that...
Hobbiton's got it on lock. That there's bunting everywhere. It's there's so much fun textiles there. It's such a delightful place. I highly recommend everyone go. It's pure joy.
It's a little bit of a schlep for me, but... and then finally, is there a fact that not a lot of people know about Tal Fitzpatrick?
So I was tossing up whether to be, I'm dyslexic, but I think a lot of us are. A lot of makers are. But I think maybe what more people don't know is that me and my partner, George Carpenter, have a secret band project that we started during COVID because he had heaps of studio time free all of a sudden. We were in Melbourne and we had some of the strictest lockdowns in the world down there. So we had a lot of time to tinker in the studio. And it's actually the first place I was able to channel my anger. So at the time I was still making this kind of very kind of optimistic, we can change the world kind of work. And I was just having to hold on to all of my pessimism and anger. And I found that through the music that we were making, I could vent and channel that outwards. So we made this EP. The band's called Why Though, and we have a kind of concept EP that was kind of about Anthropocene and ruining the planet and stuff, and all of my worst case scenario thinking. And actually from there, I took anger and took it back into the rest of my life. But that was the first kind of place where I was what happens if I let it out? And another, so that was...
So that's where you took the lid off the bottle, and then the anger has been freely flowing ever since. Yeah. What genre of music would you say?
So it's all synths and drums. So George is a drummer. So it's all live tracked drums, and then he plays all the synths, and I do all the vocals and lyrics, but through very distorted vocal chains. So it's kind of doom space synthy music.
Good for listening to on the veranda with a gin and tonic, is it?
You can give it a shot. Maybe turn the lights down. But yeah, we're actually working on some new tracks, so we might have another EP coming out early next year.
Okay. Well, it sounds like you've got plenty of rage still to process, so I suppose there's going to be a good few albums out. I'd worry that you get it all out of your system and then you'd be like, oh, crap.
Yeah, no, unfortunately.
Unfortunately not. No, there's still loads going on.
We've got a second Trump presidency, so I'm back in the studio.
Honestly. Well, listen, despite all of that, thanks for having a NeedleXChange with me.
It's really nice to have this chat and finally get to meet.
Yeah.
You just realized your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other job sites. With Indeed sponsored jobs, your post jumps to the top of the page for your relevant candidates, so you can reach the people you want faster. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed have 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. Don't wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/ARTS. Just go to Indeed.com/ARTS right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need.
This is the story of the one. As head of maintenance at a concert hall, he knows the show must always go on. That's why he works behind the scenes, ensuring every light is working, the HVAC is humming, and his facility shines. With Grainger's supplies and solutions for every challenge he faces, plus 24/7 customer support, his venue never misses a beat. Call quickgrainger.com or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.